Hello everyone, and welcome to the 16th in our series of the October Gothic A Day, Tempts the Vampire to Stay. I'm Dr. Sam Hurst, and as usual, I'll be introducing a Gothic text, giving you some idea of why I think it's important, some of the key plot points, and also giving you some further reading recommendations. At the moment, we're looking at different Gothic texts from different European countries, and we've looked at Russia, Germany and France, and today we're looking at another book primarily written in German, but by a Swiss writer, who also includes some aspects of local language and dialect. We're also going back in time slightly from yesterday's text to 1842 to read the novella The Black Spider by Jeremias Gotthelf. Now, Jeremias Gotthelf was a pastor and writer, born and continued to live in Switzerland. He served primarily rural communities, and he was more famous at the time for books which looked at and reproduced rural life. If you're interested in his work and in reading a little bit more, and for this sort of snapshot of 19th century Switzerland, one of his most famous works is, and I'm apologising for the pronunciation in advance, Uli der Knecht, which is a story of a peasant labourer who makes good. This kind of root of his writing in depictions of rural life is very evident at the beginning of The Black Spider, where we're introduced with quite an amusing description of a rural christening. Now, it soon gets a little bit more terrifying. This christening turns out to be a frame narrative for the grandpa of the family to tell an ancient story, taking us back in time to the 16th century, when the village was connected to a castle whose ruler was a knight of the Teutonic Order and was a harsh and demanding tyrant who forced the local peasantry, who were serfs at the time, to build him his castle in double quick time. And just as they, overworked and half-starved, had reached the end of that task and thought that they might just have some time to do their own planting, he demands a new task of them, to bring 100 already grown beech trees completely undamaged from miles and miles away to line an avenue up to the castle. Now, this is not really within the realm of the possible, and these workers, on their way back home from the castle, go to the side of the road and just start to weep, at which point they meet a mysterious stranger, dressed in green as a hunter, but with a red feather in his cap and burning eyes. He offers to help them transport the beech trees and asks in exchange something very small, almost nothing at all: an unbaptized child. At this point, they become terrified, realizing that the figure is the devil, and run off. But things get increasingly desperate, and one bold and brassy woman of the village, Christine, decides to make the deal herself. To seal it, the devil kisses her cheek. And that's where it all starts to go wrong for Christine. Now, the devil, true to his word, helps, but when the first child is born, the villagers try to get around him by bringing the priest in to bless the house and the birth, and also to instantly perform a baptism. Now, this happens 3 times, sort of. The second time, Christine, who's had a black spot growing on her face where the devil kissed her, her face explodes and unleashes a sort of flood of small poisonous black spiders which spread a plague locally. Towards the third time, she is determined that they will not keep the baby, but that they will give it up to the devil. And she tries to do it, but is defeated by the priest, at which point she turns into a giant poisonous spider who runs around the countryside attacking the locals. She's eventually defeated by a pious mother who sacrifices her own life to trap this devil within a piece of wood, within a wooden window frame. And that's the end of the story. Everything goes well, except the locals start to forget the tale and start to forget the necessity for humility, piousness, and devotion. And it all goes wrong once again. Now, this is a tale about plague, one of the many Gothic narratives fascinated with narratives of infection and distress, and it works allegorically. to a great extent as a plague narrative, which ties physical suffering to spiritual disease. I've already recommended a little bit of extra reading from Jeremias Gotthelf himself. If you're further interested in plague narratives within the Gothic, it's worth having a look, of course, at Mary Shelley's The Last Man, which we've already spoken about. But also, I would recommend having a look at later plague writings and searching out that history through the work of Albert Camus, for example, The Plague, to works like Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, and to the modern day zombie narratives. And we can trace quite often a Gothic path through many of these infection narratives. Anyway, I hope that you enjoy the read. It's very quick and I do recommend picking it up. See you, and be watchful for those black spiders.